Are you struggling to create an intentional headspace? Unable to connect deeper with yourself? Come, and together, let's address the elephant in the room. I'm your host, Sinead Roche, and this is the Uncomfortable Podcast. You know that feeling that you get right before you made a big decision, not right before, but right after you make the big decision? It can even, or not big decision, it can even be a small one, and it's just something that's uncertain, just something where it's just oh my God, no way I did this, and you might be feeling a lot of anxiety, which is not the best, but that just happens with uncertainty. You're just going into the unknown with something. It's like when you send a risky text and then you throw your phone against the wall. Okay, not against the wall, but you just throw your phone far away because you just don't want to see it and you're just freaking out. Yeah, that's what happens also when you take risks. And today I want to talk about the fact that we need to take more risks in life. Now, this is not something that I do as much as I should be doing, and especially because I'm talking about this episode, but I felt like it'd be good to do, especially before New Year's is about to come. And I guess just going into that, I want to do things where it's not something I would normally do. That doesn't mean be spontaneous to the max and go jump off of a freaking cliff or anything like that. But I definitely want to take more risks. And I think right now is the time to do it, especially maybe before my prefrontal cortex is fully developed. I also want to learn what it means to take calculated risks. And now, why did I mention the prefrontal cortex? Because that is what happens when your prefrontal cortex is developed around the age of 25. Then that structure in your brain, that regulates your thoughts, your actions and emotions, it's fully there. And I feel I don't know. I think that's going to be a great time to be around, but right now it's not fully developed. So maybe this episode will look stupid to me in a few years. But right now, I want to be able to understand what I'm about to do, might not be lead to the best outcome, but I'm still going to be able to do it in a healthy way, or in a way where I'm still able to navigate myself out of the worst outcome of it, if that makes sense. I just think that's important that we do. I think it's important that we do that for many reasons, but we'll get into that. First of all, what is a risk? A risk is a situation that involves exposing ourselves to danger. And now, obviously, I don't think anyone likes that. And that's taken to when you think of dangerous, that can be exactly the example I gave with jumping off of a cliff. But danger is anything that is uncertain to us. And that's where especially people who are really anxious, or even not anxious, what will end up happening to you, when you're undergoing this risk, is that there's going to be an unexpected reward that happens. Which is also the reason why there's some people who are constantly risk affinitive and always taking risks because they're addicted to the extra dopamine release that also comes with it. But that's not the case for some people who are really anxious, where it's just oh my gosh, it's just making it worse. Even the overthinking will just increase at that point. But yeah, risks aren't just talking about those big, extreme, drastic ones, but even the risk of just telling someone you like them, or the risk of starting your own podcast and feeling stupid with it. That is a risk in itself. And I think, even though I've said we need to take more risks, I think we need to take more calculated risks. And not let the calculations of both the positive and negatives end up stopping us from actually carrying out the action that we set out to do. Obviously, if it we see more positives than negatives. But a calculated risk is a careful analysis of what you stand to gain against what you could lose, and understanding whether or not you're actually going to partake in the risk, or, maybe go the safer option and, stick to your routine, stick to what you normally do. But, I think, and the reason why I've started this episode today is that I've just been realizing, right now, I'm 20, right? And I'm fortunate enough that I don't have many obligations, which I think a lot of 20-year-olds do, but they don't have that many obligations or that many responsibilities, but at the same time, you do. And so this is, again, dependent from person to person and their situation. But I think right now, like, I don't have that many experiences as well. And I'm about to graduate from uni. And what I was thinking is just like, I'm kind of overwhelmed by the fact that like my life could go not one of two ways, but like one way is like clearly pointed out where it's just like, you find a job and you just continue that job for the rest of your life. And in my mind, like if it's a job I love, great. But like, okay, so I'm set, I'm secure my entire life. And so for some people, that's great. But for other people, like even myself, I'm just like, there's nothing more. Like that's literally it. Like I don't strive for anything else. I just stay like that, which is, and I think especially now, like as hard as it is to get a job, that is also a great outcome, just not for me. And so with this entire episode, like the idea of it is just like, not that I think I can control my fate, and this has a lot to do with like my faith as well, but I do want to control my faith. Like I want to use my free will. And I want to make risky decisions and like take advantage of the fact that right now I personally don't have that many like obligations or that many responsibilities. And I don't want to end up with regrets. Like I have all this energy right now. Like I don't want it to go to waste because I was like so scared of just playing it safe. And who knows, maybe I do end up playing it safe, but I don't know. I want to also make certain decisions where it's not 100% guaranteed that I'll make it. Not for the risk of it, but just because I want to prove to myself that I can in some aspects. And I also want to like prove to myself that I can pick myself back up in those spaces as well. But let's get back to like more of the reasons why we should take risks, which have to do a lot with my own personal reasons. But taking our own risks like allows us also to explore different ideas. It allows us to give ourselves an opportunity to get better. It has this idea of like, I don't want to settle. And like when you take risks, I mean, yes, there always is the case of like it not turning out well, but like there's also the case of it turning out better than you could have expected. And going for something that you really truly wanted, even though maybe people told you wouldn't be able to do it. Other aspects of like why we need to take risks is because, and according to like the Uncomfortable podcast, like we're going through uncomfortable lessons, right? Taking risks is, it means pushing ourselves out of our own comfort zone and out of our own safety zone. And that also like, first of all, we're taking that action. Like obviously there's going to be risks and there's going to be adversity that like challenges throughout our entire life. But actually willing to take the risk and making that decisive decision, like, hey, I'm going to calculate it for myself and then I'm going to go ahead and take it or not take it. I think that is also us willingly trying to develop our emotional resilience in the face of uncertainty. And I think that, at the end of the day, even if it doesn't go well, you're going to learn a lesson. I was having a conversation today with a friend where we were talking about like, people come into your life either to stay there because they're meant to be there, or people also come into your life to teach you a lesson. And, at that point, like when you're learning a lesson, you don't like it. You don't like it. But sometimes it's necessary. And it's the same thing with risk. Like some of the risks, they're meant to show you that like, good that you were able to take it. And some of the risks were also just meant to show you like, hey, you were able to get back up in that sense. And I think that also like helps us prove a lot to ourselves about like, are we strong enough? And of course, I don't want that to be the entire reason of like why anyone goes up and ends up taking risks, in the sense that like, I need to see like if I can carry this out fully, like, and get back up. Cause like, obviously you're gonna be thrown with multiple different challenges in life that's already gonna show you like, hey, you can pick yourself back up. Like, let's not try to choose like difficult moments in life, let's not try to make it harder. But I do think like if it doesn't go in a positive way, that even that will help us to, better reaffirm ourselves and be like, hey, you've done this in the past, you can do it again, like you can get back up. Again, let's not have that to be the main reason, but it just helps you to reinforce your self-belief, whether that be, again, self-belief through picking yourself back up, or self-belief because you were able to do it and you were able to cross that, like face the uncertainty of it, and it come out like in your favor. So let's learn to take calculated risks. With all that being said, and maybe you're not the right person I'm speaking to today. Maybe you just want to hear about this, see what does it actually mean to take a risk, and that's completely okay. It's not for everyone. And there's also so many different situations where you take risks probably anyways, and you didn't even know it. Doesn't have to be the biggest ones that I'm talking about, like I'm trying to encourage right now, even for myself, like what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to talk about that on the podcast here right now. But like even those risks that I plan on taking, like they don't always have to be the biggest ones. It can even be just small ones that feel risky for you though. But anyways, let's learn to take calculated risks. What does that mean? It means us assessing the potential outcomes, both the good and the bad ones, and preparing as much as possible for both. I think we really need to emphasize preparing for both because, oftentimes like when people tell us like, okay, you're going to take a risk, right? It's always like, okay, can you handle it, if worse comes to worse? Yeah, but can you also handle it and manage it if best comes to best, if it comes to the positive outcome? Like, are you able to do that as well? And then lastly, like, I've said this, like sometimes you just fail. It might not you fail, but the situation itself just doesn't come out in that light, but still understanding that there's a part of the process and understanding that that's going to help you to build emotional resilience. That's going to help you to understand, hey, like I can do this, And why I've mentioned this throughout the podcast, not the podcast, but throughout this episode, like, why do I think we should be doing this? Building up your resilience. I think that it will also help you to, like, in the future, to discern when to take a risk and when not to take a risk, because you'll have experience from other, like, opportunities that you've had or from other, like, situations that you've been in where you've taken a risk and it probably maybe backfired at that point. You'll also be able to see it like in the future, like, oh, okay, like I've actually done this before. Like, let me not do this because I've seen this outcome. Or maybe it's a different scenario. But I think that the more times you have the experience, like the more you practice it practically, and practice being able to carefully analyze it, and see other factors that you didn't see before coming, the better you get at it. And I think that's just with everything else in life, or like just the better you're able to handle it, whether that, again, be the best outcome or the worst outcome in that situation. And lastly, like to the people who you're trying to quote unquote make it in some capacity or just like be better, like now is not the time to play safe. I think if you're, and this is, I'm not trying to just say this is like if you're young, because I know people who are in their 50s and right now they're starting businesses. I'm like, but and that's great for them because they have the experience, but now is not the time to play safe, like if you don't have the obligations, if you don't have the responsibilities, if you know something about yourself where it's like you want to do this, then get to it. And even sometimes like people who have like the most responsibility, most obligations, they're the ones who take the most risks, which I think is insane. I think it's insane. But I see so many people do that on like online, like where their entire families are depending on them and they take the risk. And I think that goes to show you that anyone can do it. But obviously it's going to be different from person to person, and that's completely okay. And getting to the people who, might not necessarily be the most encouraged at this point to take the risk. Those might be people who prefer stability or routine. And I agree with that. Like I think that's also part of the reason why I don't like doing even spontaneous things, quote unquote. I'm someone of routine, I like doing the things when I know I'm going to do those things. And it just being really stable, because it also for me is like a bit about like safety as well. And that might also be a reason why certain people like are risk averse because you might have not had safety in the past. And so why would you want to go and disturb that, Then people who are highly anxious, also different cultural factors play into this. Like if you come from an individualistic culture, which is like the US versus coming from like South Korea, which is what's it called? Oh my gosh, I just forget the word. Collectivist culture, my bad. Collectivist culture, which is like more about thinking about not just yourself, but also who this is also impacting, like the family and your inner circle in that sense. And also other people who might, have might not necessarily want to take risks are also perfectionists, because you can't control every single aspect of it or how it's going to turn out. Like that might be also really hard for you to then want to do, And the question or just like reflection that I want like people who specifically fall in those categories to ask themselves is like, can you recognize though when being cautious is helpful and when it's being a barrier? Let me repeat that. Can you recognize when being cautious is helpful and when it's being a barrier? For me personally, because I'm someone who's really anxious a lot, I know like, especially when it comes to like emotional risks, it's a barrier for me. Like my cautiousness is a barrier. Like if my anxiety is increasing and it's getting worse because I haven't done the thing that I needed to do, like, or the risk, because I haven't taken the risk yet, because maybe I haven't asked that question of like, hey, what are we? But that's what I've like been able to like realize about myself. Like if it is making my internal state, like even like my mood, like even worse, then for me at that point, it's a barrier and it's not helping me. Even if it's just to, reach back to like emotional stability, like it's not helping me because I'm not taking the risk. So be able to discern that as well. And now for everyone, I want you guys to reflect on this question. And when you're going into like these scenarios with this potential risk, what's the worst that could happen if I take the risk? And am I prepared to handle the outcome of both the best and the worst? Once again, I want you guys to focus on like, are you able to also manage it, like, and also to like hold, I guess carry through with the plans. Like it's not just about, getting the positive like part of the risk or anything like that. It's also, are you able to carry it? And I think that's something we really forget a lot about when it comes to risk, because risk does not necessarily have the most positive connotation. So please reflect on that question. Yeah. And thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for supporting this week's episode of The Uncomfortable Podcast. Make sure to tune in every Monday for a new episode on Spotify and YouTube, and go check out our TikTok and Instagram for more content.